Welcome, everybody, to Psychedelics Today. Joe here, and on the show we have Zoe Helene, psychedelic feminist and founder of Cosmic Sister. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me on this podcast. It's great.
We are happy to have you because you seem to have made quite the impact in the world of psychedelics with feminism. It's kind of obvious at a lot of these conferences that women are underrepresented, and it's not a simple cause, right? It's multiple causes, and there's also a lot of dangerous stuff happening in the Amazon that you've covered extensively already elsewhere.
I do work with women, and there are different elements of how I see psychedelic feminism from within our space. I like to call it the psychedelic space or community or movement, if you like. It's certainly not an industry, so we don't want to call it that. That would be bad. But some of these psychedelic conferences I've been to, I would look up there, and I wasn't alone in this, and sort of be amazed that there were so many more men than women up on the stage, but that also can be a little more complicated than men not thinking about it and not inviting as many women. Women also tend to be a little more shy with getting up there. It's part of our socialization, so we too need to step up to the plate. We're doing that. It's a lot better. So since I started noticing that, I have to say I have to give kudos to some of the guys running these conferences, as well as some of the fabulous women who are really doing well, bringing more women's voices onto the scene. So it is really improving. That's the good news.
That's good. I'm glad it appears that way. On our show, we had the initial goal, because of that issue, of trying to do a straight 50-50 split between men and women, and we haven't done too well racially, but it's an underrepresented field for sure racially, but we're going to work on that if we can.
Race is a very, very tricky subject.
Yeah.
Very, very tricky. So we'll get back to that later.
Yeah. So.
But gender is also tricky today, because really it's like just splitting people into male and female is also tricky. So I like to say to people, I am focused on something that I have a calling for, and I have knowledge and understanding, personal experience also in, and that is being female, being born female and raised female in a male-dominated culture. So that clarifies it. And that doesn't mean that other people's experiences or challenges are less important than the ones I'm working on. It just means this is what I'm focused on currently as a professional, and it's just where I found myself. It doesn't mean that's where I will be 10 years from now, but it's where I am now. So, yeah, we have we have our own unique set of experiences to work on, and working on them in the medicine space, in the ayahuasca scene or whatever other natural psychedelics you want to be exploring. That's where I have found my work, and it's a really interesting field.
So I would like to just briefly, I know you've covered it extensively elsewhere, and we've talked about it a lot on the show, but just the general help around trying to be safer with ayahuasca, maybe specifically as a lady, like what kind of concerns might a lady have going in, and then we can get into some other subjects if we can.
I'm 53 years old, so I'm not really in the sort of zone where I would be so much of a predator's victim. I wouldn't fall prey to that in the same way, although Peru is different, I have to say. They don't see older women in the same way as our culture does. But I have been a younger woman, and I certainly have dealt with it in the past in other parts of my life, and I know what it is. I've been there. I've been an attractive younger woman who was vulnerable to sexual predators. I've been naive. I've been confident, overconfident, thinking that I was safe when I wasn't. I've been through many of those experiences. Luckily, I have never been raped, and I do like to say that because so many women have been. But I certainly came close to it at least 4 different occasions, and those memories are extremely strong in my mind. And I learned from each experience some of the things not to do. I think one of the things that's really important when talking about this is victim blame, because we are not doing that. That is not what I'm doing when I'm talking about things you can do to try to protect yourself. Sometimes something can't be helped, and that's really tragic, but that's the truth also. But you can also educate yourself, inform yourself, and make choices that are safer. So, I like to bring this up, even though it's not about ayahuasca, but it's something that really taught me something important about, paying attention to where I was and what I was doing and my role in my own sexual safety. When I was about 23, I think, maybe even 22, I was in college. I was working I was getting a degree in theater, and we were pulling an all-nighter, which was typical, but I was exhausted, and I needed to be on stage the next day, so I needed to, get some sleep. So I felt bad leaving my colleagues there because they were going to pull an all-nighter and I wasn't. It was a commuter campus. My car was very, very far away on the lot, and there were lights, but it was really empty other than my car, way, 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 way in the distance. So I still felt terrible about asking someone to walk me to my car. And all these different things that I've been sort of taught were telling me, don't do it, this is dangerous. But I did it anyway because I didn't feel right asking people to take time to walk me to my car. I made a mistake, and I knew it the moment I walked out. I actually had it in my mind, which is so amazing. I thought, my God, something could happen any day. Somebody could literally walk out of that gutter. And it's as if I manifested that person, because they did come out of that gutter. In front of me, in the dark, a man walked out of the gutter, and he was definitely not right in the head. And long story short, I managed to get away. I talked to the guy. I had had experience with people with severe mental illnesses, and I identified him as that right away and was able to speak to him like he was a patient until I got to my car. I offered him a ride. I said, let me open the car from inside. You go around that side and get in, and he did, and then I drove off. But he absolutely could have pulled me into the forest, and I may never have been heard of again. So that taught me a lot, and I tell young women all the time, I tell them that story, do not be shy to ask somebody to walk you to your room, to your car. Don't walk alone at night, especially. That said, 2 other times in my life were in broad daylight, in public spaces. So you just don't know. It's way worse than most people think. I think that full-on rape is a lot more common than people want to admit. So, and it's been my experience within my friends and my family, the women in my family, and just many, many women I meet. I think it's way more than 1 out of 4. I think it's more like 3 out of 5. That's a lot. So that said, when you're dealing with something like ayahuasca, and we'll keep it on ayahuasca for now, you're also adding to the normal situation this spiritual retreat and a psychedelic medicine. So a state that's very altered, you're altered. And the whole idea is to alter that state. And the whole idea is to put your trust in the medicine and really go there. You can't be holding back. So you need a really safe space. You need to know you're safe. And for women, we do have special circumstances. So from that perspective, I just want to talk a little bit about the dieta in the Shipibo tradition, and I'm guessing you know about that, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, well, the concept for anybody who doesn't know is pretty much that you lay off certain things, substances and sex, and you lay off of those for a little while for reasons that, we don't fully understand, but they've been around for a long time, and those shamans know that from experience, and they have, they've come to these conclusions over hundreds of years. We don't even know how long, and they make a lot of sense. So, some of them are a little silly with the, no salt, no sugar, no oil, and, every different center has their own diets for food, and that's another conversation. But the sex diet, the no-sex diet, or dieta, it makes a lot of sense. So you've got several things going on here. If you're a young woman who is going to the Amazon or going anywhere to do ayahuasca, to experience ayahuasca for your own personal growth, healing, inspiration, revelation, whatever it is, you need to know you're going to be safe. And I think it's very, very important to pay attention to the dieta when it comes to sex. I think it's important for men, too. And I'm very sex positive. I was not brought up in a repressed sexual household. I've been pretty open about it my whole life. I've had a great life with that. I don't want to go into that, the details in this podcast, but I've had a great sex life, okay? And I do. I'm not shy that way. So it's not about sex being bad or shameful or anything like that. It's a wonderful part of life. It's one of the great parts of life. So it's not about that. It's more about sex is complicated, and our culture is complicated around sex. So sometimes we are holding social programmings or experiences that have shaped us sexually that we're not even aware of. Some of them we are. And they also have to do with our relationship dynamics with sexuality. So when you're going into the ayahuasca space to really work on yourself, you don't want to mix everything up. Does that make any sense? If you're having sex at the same time you're at a retreat, maybe with your boyfriend, that's somebody that you have great sex with, that you have a wonderful sexual relationship with, it's still a good idea to lay off the sex until you're out of that situation. Because you may get to something inside yourself that you don't even know about that is, in fact, part of your dynamic in the relationship that you could work on. It's complicated. We're women and men too, we're both bombarded by entertainment, media, advertising of sexual imagery, sexual ideas. We don't even know who we are half the time with that. So it's hard to find a totally healthy place in that culture. So in this space, you want to be clear of that. You want to just say, you know what, I'm going to set that aside. I'm just going to put it aside for a little bit of time, and I can do that. It'll be there when I get home again, right?
Yeah.
We can survive a couple of weeks. And I really think, they all say before at least a week. I say longer if you can do it, depending on who you are and what you're working on. If you're working on a rape, wait a little longer. Give yourself even longer. If you're working on, you've been, brought up in a very repressed sexual environment, and you're having problems with, having too much sex with people, maybe, that kind of thing. Give yourself even longer. Treat it as something somewhat like an addiction, even, if that's your problem. Whoever you are, every individual is different, is my point. But when you're going into this space, you want to be clear of that. And you might even find, this is the irony of it, you might even find that ayahuasca heightens your sexuality, actually makes you horny. And I've talked to others, and other people have had this experience too. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't mean you go back to your tombo and you sleep with your, tombo mate. Or worse.
The shaman.
Yeah. And that's another conversation. So this is where you have to get into the being careful with victim blame, because it's a really tricky subject. I think what I try to do is empower women to know what they're getting into before they go, to really make that decision with themselves. I will not sleep with the shaman. Now look, rape is rape. That is something else. You're dragged into the jungle, or you're drugged and raped. You have no control over that. But you do have control over your choices. You do. And you have control. You can say no. And if you can't say no because of physical force, that's rape. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
You can have responsibility, and you need to take responsibility. So one of the things you can do before you go to an ayahuasca retreat is make an agreement with yourself. I am going to stick to the dieta. I am not going to engage in sexual activities, even if I find somebody extremely hot. No, I'm not going to do it. Even if I meet my soulmate, no, I'm not going to do it. I'll do it later. You can wait, and you should wait. If it's really your soulmate, it can wait.
They'll be around.
They'll be around.
You'll
They'll
find
be
each
around.
other again.
And you have to make that commitment to yourself. And then if you don't, you're breaking your own promises. And you need to really think about that. Whether you get in trouble or not, you need to think about the fact that you went all the way to the Amazon, you drank a sacred medicine, you were in the medicine, and then you broke your own dieta. Why? And that is what I think you need to bring up in the medicine space the next night. Why did I break my own promise to myself? Because I believe that if you do, then there's something there you need to look at sexually.
Yeah. So this is interesting. The way I'm understanding it is that, sex can bring up a lot of these like personal dynamics and whatnot for a person. I've always heard with the dieta too, like no sex because, say ayahuasca like has this jealousy to it, and then that's also why. Is that part of? I don't know what's your take on that. I mean,
no.
It's just, okay.
I somebody can believe what they like, but I don't agree with that.
Cool.
I think that it's just simply more about, setting that aside so that you can be clear to look at other things, including your own sexuality. Mm-hmm. You're going to start, some people talk about even touching other people in the medicine space and, that your energy, you can get the energy from the other person, yada, yada, yada. Maybe, maybe not. But with sex, definitely, and there's, like, here's an example. Many women are programmed in our culture, even if it's subtle, to serve men sexually. It's everywhere. Most movies have a prostitute or more than one prostitute. Many have strippers. All of these women are sexually serving males. Then this concept of hooking up, which is prevalent in the younger generations, is primarily for males to be served by women, usually behind the gym. There's a blowjob or whatever. That's a servant position. That's a sexual service position for a female. That is so prevalent in our culture that most women, somewhere in there, have that inside them. So all the more reason, if you're looking to empower and liberate yourself sexually, you want to look at that. Look at that sort of sexuality in the medicine space, but don't engage in sexual activities until you're home and you've had some time to integrate. And the idea is to be healthy. So that's what I think it's about.
Cool, yeah.
But back to, like, for the women being safer, I'm talking about women who have complete control over their situation, and sometimes that's not so. I mean, you hear these stories, like with Lily Ross, she was given Toei, okay? So that's something you can avoid. You can specifically say what's in the brew and know what's in the brew and just say no to Toei. Now, that said, I know that at Blue Morpha they put a little teeny bit in. It's artfully brewed, and it's beautiful brew. So a little teeny bit, yeah, maybe with a trusted shaman, okay? But there's no need for it. Ayahuasca, traditional ayahuasca with the two primary plants is perfectly fine. You will get a very powerful journey out of that. And there's no need for anything else.
And can you describe what Toei is for people that are listening that don't know anything about it?
Well, Toei is a particular plant that can put you in an altered state it can be quite nightmarish, and it's a little bit like a date rape drug. It can be used in that way. So it is a sacred plant, and it is used in potions, and it's almost like a poison in a way because it puts you in such a negative place. So this is something that predators can use to put men and women into a state where they have control, psychological control over them, and sometimes physical control as well. You're not in your right state of mind. So it's really good to just not indulge. Mm-hmm. And the only time I would say play around with it maybe is if you were a serious, ethnobotanist or anthropologist or herbalist who wanted to explore what it really means or what it's like to experience that medicine, but that's a whole other situation. It's not in the Amazon at an ayahuasca retreat. Mm-hmm. So when you're in these things, this other thing I wrote down here is, there's sexual safety and then there's physical safety as well. Look at where you're going. Is the center well built? Is it well maintained? You're in the jungle. This is not home. It may feel like home because you're in the medicine and it's so amazing and inspiring, but it isn't home. You don't know those plants. You don't know those critters. You don't know those snakes. They do have snakes in the Amazon, and the snakes are very poisonous, and you can die. And you need to know that there are risks associated with going to the Amazon. It hasn't happened to me, thank goodness, but it could happen. They're there. I've seen them. So, there's physical safety to consider as well. Respect nature. That's all I have to say about that, But the sexual side of it, this is another thing I like to say, and I think this is true It's unfortunate, but I think it's true that women are safer in numbers and with traveling with men, preferably big men. But it could be a man that's not physically big, but is powerful, has a power about him. If you are traveling with a male, you're more likely to be left alone. If you're traveling with other women, you might entice some attention from some guys who think you're, oh, look at those cute women and that, oh yeah, look at them, but you've got each other and you can watch out for each other. And that's really, really important. So that's another thing I tell women when they ask is let's say you're young women and you want to go down there yourself and you've got a group, or just two even, if you're going with someone you really trust, like a really close friend or a close sister, you can basically agree to tell each other when the other one is pushing it with some guy, pushing their sexuality, maybe flirting with someone they maybe shouldn't flirt with, or sexually posturing in ways they don't even know they're doing. Those kinds of things, you can say, hey, we agreed we're not going to do that here. Because that goes back to another thing that's really uncomfortable and people don't like to talk about, but it's also true. Women are also programmed to be attracted by powerful men and men in leadership positions. It's part of our programming. Some people would argue it's biological. There might be a little bit of that, but it's definitely cultural. And, that can be however a male is perceived as powerful or in a leadership position depends on the culture. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's physical prowess. Maybe it's, status in the community like a king or or whatever. It's different things, or a great hunter, let's say. But in this case, it's often this idea that's put on the shaman, the male shaman, who's, you have this sort of magical, heightened idea of who that person is. And that is something you have to really, really watch, especially in vulnerable women who are dealing with, not very good sexual boundaries to begin with.
Right.
And sadly, if you go back to the earlier part of the conversation with, sexual abuse in our culture, that is often manifests itself in a lack of sexual boundaries. So the people who have already been hurt in that way are by far the most vulnerable. And the predators know that.
What would you say about, I guess, if somebody had some of these sexual wounds or traumas are coming up, and it seems like a cultural difference, about how well trained the shaman is, maybe to hold that container. Because as you're talking about all this, I'm just thinking about breathwork sessions that I've facilitated, and some of that has come up. But as a facilitator, I know that those boundaries should never be crossed, and you really set that. But I'm just thinking too about the cultural differences, and then wonder how some of those shamans might perceive some of that.
That's also a very complicated subject, but let's just say it's South America, first of all. So there's also tends to be a very macho culture for males, but it's also an individual thing. You've got a lot of really great guys. I would trust Don Alberto at Blue Morpho was a really great guy. I mean, I've spoken to him outside of ceremony as well, and he's a completely different person. He's got his shaman thing going in the ceremony, and outside he's just like this really warm guy. And you know what? He would just never go there because he knows it's inappropriate. And then there are people like, Joe is cool. Joe is totally cool. Ricardo at Nuhuirao would never go there. He just wouldn't.
Yeah.
And they've had bad experiences with their teacher too. So they have seen the dark side, and they wouldn't go there themselves. So they're very adamant about it. So I think you have to be very, very careful with looking at it as a cultural thing. I think it's more a personal culture, a personal choice, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as here. You might have, look at the whole situation with the Catholic priest. It doesn't mean that every single Catholic priest is that way.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So it's really the individual, and it's important to listen to others if people have said they've had bad experiences, or some of the forums online also. But just go with others. Go with other people and ask them to keep an eye out on you.
Do you have any tips for women that are looking for a retreat center for like maybe safety? Like what would somebody look for when they're searching for a retreat?
Chris and I have a rule. We do not recommend any center we have not personally been to and experienced. There may be many more that are great that we haven't been to yet, but we will not do that, even if a friend says it's wonderful. We can say our friend says it's wonderful, but we just have that rule. That said, centers also change. That people don't always stay there. They move around, and you just never really know. And also, power can mess with people's heads, and people can also be corrupted. So it's tricky. It's very tricky. So I think I would say if you can go somewhere that has a women's retreat specifically and has women's shamans, and you feel good about that, that's a great choice. If you're really vulnerable. Otherwise, go with friends who you really trust, who are going to watch out for you. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody's going to get in trouble if they're with us. I know that. I'm going to watch them carefully. And they all get this whole spiel.
That's good.
They get it a lot, but I'm protective. And I understand some of the vulnerabilities. I've known people very closely who've gotten in trouble that way. Mm. And I know what it does to your life. It's not good. But, we also talk about things like yoga and, like you were saying, the breath work and that sort of thing, same thing. Mm. Any kind of situation where a male is in a position where they are the sort of spiritual leader or can be perceived as a spiritual leader, they're going to instantly be more attractive to certain women. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, the good thing about the breath work sometimes is like the male-female. The situation that came up for me, like I was so thankful that I had another female facilitator to help me out with it, because I was like, nope, that's all you then. Like I'm not doing that.
Well, yeah, there's that too. You have to be able to say no yourself. It goes two ways, and it's true. I've spoken with different men who have that experience where the woman is the aggressor, and that does happen. And you just have to say no.
Yeah.
And also, the other thing about that is people who are harmed in that way sexually and who do become aggressors on either side can be very convincing. Oh, it's fine. Nothing's going to happen. There's nothing really wrong with that. Whatever they want to say, they can be very convincing. So this is why the dieta is so important. You have to make that commitment to yourself. And I always say, I think I said this already, but I'll say it again more clearly. If you make the promise that you are going to lay off sex for the before period, like the preparation period, the immersion period at the retreat in the Maloka, and then the integration period after it, you make that commitment to yourself and to others, and then you break that commitment, then that is what you need to work on in the medicine space. Because there's something there.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is coming from someone, again, who's, sex is great. Sex is a great part of life, but we do live in an abusive culture sexually, especially towards women. And, men have also, there are a lot of men who are raped as young boys. That happens much more than people like to admit, and I think it in some ways is even harder for men to tell people about later in life. And I've seen that in several cases in friends who didn't tell me for many, many, many years. So it can be devastating. It's not only women that are raped.
Let's, I guess, jump in a little bit about what is ecofeminism is all about. We had Leah Friedman on. I did a little interview with her a couple months ago when I was up in Massachusetts, and we started diving into it, but then she said maybe she would leave that for you to define and talk about.
I love Leah. She's awesome. I think that ecofeminism is another... Okay, let me say that again. I totally screwed that up. Ecofeminism is another ism, so they're just useful terms for umbrella, for a group, a subset of something that you're working on. And it's the idea that we're very, very much environmentalists like other environmentalists, but we're also coming from the approach of this imbalance, this gender imbalance also has affected the environment because it's affected human culture. And with the gender imbalance in human culture, I'm trying to be kind. What I'm trying to say is the patriarchy, the males have screwed it up. Okay, they've had the power for millennia now, and they have screwed it up. And we have not had positions of power to have real influence. We've had some, but not enough, not anywhere close to how many of us there are on the planet. There are 50% women on this planet, females. And we do not have anything close to 50% of the power to make decisions. I'm not talking about power over. That's a male concept. And it's not all men, but it's a patriarchal, the way the patriarchy is today, it is a patriarchal concept. Power over. There's nothing wrong with power. Being empowered, having personal power, having the power to have your voice heard, having the power to be influential. These are things we don't have enough of. There's a scarcity of power for women in this world, and it's not okay. So we look around us, and it hurts us terribly to see what's going on. And it hurts men too. I'm not saying that men don't feel this too, but I'm saying that from a woman's perspective, we're feeling like our voices aren't heard. We're feeling like we don't have enough say in how it all is rolling out in the world. And what we're seeing is devastation, and it hurts. It goes against everything we are, and you could even say that's partially biological from a mothering perspective. I mean, I'm not a mother. I don't have my own children, but I certainly I have such a deep love for other species, for the environment itself, the earth. I have such a deep love, I can't even put it into words. So when I see what we're doing to this planet and to the other species, it's devastating to me. That's what ecofeminism is. It's the same idea. We need more women in that space making decisions for the environment. And until there are more women, we'll have more of the same.
And how do we go about doing it? How do we get more women involved? Like how can the broader community, not just women, help encourage more women to get more active or more empowered?
Are you asking how men can help?
Yeah, how can we be allies? Or how can the whole community be
You're
allies?
being an ally right now by asking the question. I think it's the same question I might have when I'm speaking to someone who's dealt with the politics of skin tone and has darker skin than I am. I've dealt with my own, prejudices towards me from a physical perspective because I look, quote, ethnic, unquote, and I've experienced that all my life, and many doors were shut, and I know that that's a horrible thing, but I do not have dark skin, like I'm not African American, okay? So I don't know what that's like personally on a day-to-day basis. But what I've done is I've asked many friends and people who I've met, and I pay attention and I listen to other people's, really some of the really great leaders in the space, and I've read books, and I'm trying to understand it from that perspective. I can never have the personal experience because I'm not African American, but I can learn and I can care. And I can fight. I can be an ally. I can fight for their rights. And that's pretty much what it is for guys, too. It's the same thing. You can't really know what it's like for us because you don't walk in our bodies. And you don't walk in our bodies from birth. We experience sexism very, very early on. And it's insidious, it's constant, it's omnipresent, and it's very abusive. So this is something that, we all know this, and those of us who are just happy people, we just try to rise above the anger, but you have to go through these phases of anger, usually in your early 20s. And I think that guys that are more sensitive to that are just, I don't want to say few and far between because I see some progress, especially in younger men. How old are you?
I'm 35, I think.
Okay, great generation for guys. Some really good guys in your generation from that perspective. I've run into some guys at conferences and whatnot and had wonderful conversations with them. It's a different level of understanding of the issues of sexism. And the thing also that I'm finding with this work with psychedelic feminism, the more I work with this, the more I'm thinking about how males are also programmed and how they're also suffering like we are. It's really, really, we're all in this together. And while I'm definitely still focused on women, I just see more and more that, it's so related to how men are programmed. It's not separate. It's very difficult to separate those two things. Because let me give you an example. this whole thing of, youth is beauty and a woman is only valued up into such and so age, whatever your break-off age is, as you go through life, you begin to see the movie stars who are your age, like for me, be the male movie stars, my age. You love them because they're your generation. You watch them go through their careers. They have staying power, and they're still doing good work. And then suddenly their co-stars start getting younger and younger and younger.
Right.
And it doesn't stop. And you start going, well, what the heck is that about? Is it his choice? Does he just not think women his own age are attractive anymore? What is that? Or is it the producer? Or is it the director? Are there economic pressures here that I'm not understanding? Well, in that case, why aren't they strong enough to say, no, I want a co-star that's at least within however many years of my age? Where does that stop? 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years? It's so prevalent that it's just outrageous that I can't even believe that Hollywood gets away with what they get away with. It's so blatantly sexist. So from the male perspective, what is that about? What's that programming for you guys? That's what I think. If you guys were going to work on stuff like that, your own sexist notions that are harmful towards women, if you took those up in the medicine space, what would you find? You might be liberated too, because those are really false ideas, and they're unhealthy. They're inherently unhealthy. And they cause trouble later. I know a lot of men in their 60s and 70s who just can't get into a relationship with a woman of their own age. And they're miserable and lonely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great question to meditate on. Have you ever come across the work of Martine Prachtel?
No, I have not.
Well, I was at like a weekend workshop with him, but he was talking about the aging women in the Mayan community that he lived in, and he was talking about this, the thing about youthhood, but how in his culture or where he was in in Guatemala, how like the older women were just like really really important, and that the wrinkles would just show you how much they've been through, the scars that they've been through, and how beautiful all that is, and how our culture doesn't see this as beauty. And I've definitely meditated on that for a little bit, like after listening to him talk about that and thinking about aging and how it is beautiful and how life just beats us down and each wrinkle and scar shows us how much that we've been through. Yeah,
and the double standard there, where you'll see the guy that's like on the screen, and he's maybe he's still physically beautiful, but he's also full of wrinkles and tough, and he's scarred, and he's been through life. He's a experienced guy, and he's really still sexy to everybody, and then he ends up with a 25-year-old. It's just with just perfect, flawless childhood skin, which is really what it is. And hey, look, youth is beautiful. You come upon a young person, and it's like, wow. I'm not going to lie, but what it's just that there's this throwaway culture, where we're supposed to just sort of not exist past a certain age, and it's ludicrous because we have a different experience. We know we have value, and we know we're actually improving. We're gaining wisdom, we're gaining knowledge, we're reaching our prime. But that's part of why it's so difficult in our culture, because we have this complete conflict of how we experience ourselves as being in a prime, and the exterior culture as treating us as if we're past our prime. So I would say in terms of working with psychedelics, these are great things to explore from a male perspective. What is my programming? What is my, you could ask yourself, what is my male programming towards women? Because you too have been bombarded with all this same crap. It's not like it's all us. We don't, we get maybe a little bit more because we have to look at all the girly magazines, and maybe you don't look at those so much. But you still see them. And the guy magazines, hey, some of those are pretty terrible too.
Yeah, I don't look at them.
Yeah, well, but they're everywhere. How do you get around them?
Right.
Right? How do you get around those magazines and those movies if you go to see movies?
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, I definitely think Hollywood and media, really keeps this cycle going. It's tricky.
It's capitalism too, and I'm not an anti-capitalist, but it is capitalism. It's money. We have a joke in this family. I can't stand. Nick Cage. Nick Cage drives me crazy. He would never have made it if he didn't have a family member that put him there. He just wouldn't have. He's just not that good. Every now and then, he's kind of fun. He's great when he's quirky and weird, but he just thinks he's way better than he is, and he ruins so many scripts. And if I were a playwright, it would drive me crazy too. But he's everywhere. You can't get around him, and we'll be surfing, Netflix or whatever to find a good movie to be like another Nick Cage movie. And, in desperation, because we've watched just about everything, we'll occasionally watch one, and I'll say, see, now they're going to say everybody likes Nick Cage because we just bought that movie. Because that's all they're serving up. So it's this idea of, if you give them your dollar, are you voting for more of the same? And how do they know that really what you'd like is a different actor if you just watched a Nick Cage movie? It's the same with sexism. But we have so many movies like that. Most of the movies are sexist. What do? Never watch anything? So we have just learned to watch them and try not to let that bother us too much. And I suspect it's the same for people who are like African American, who don't see themselves being cast, or Asian American, who don't see themselves cast very often. I was one of the things that comes up a lot with this work is these ideas of cultural appropriation. Mm-hmm. And I've given a lot of thought to that, and I'd love to bring that up a little later. But what I was thinking of is, my mother's side of the family is Greek American, and her people came over because they had to. It wasn't to seek a better life. It was, to save their lives. And, it was very difficult at the beginning, and they were treated with a great deal of racism. They were darker skinned. They were definitely more ethnic looking. They did very well with assimilation, but that's what they did to survive in this culture. So what's funny to me with this whole, it's not really funny, you have to laugh really. People will bring up cultural appropriation from a native perspective, and I look and I say, well, what about my people? My people, you use the language constantly. They never get any credit for that. There's Greek in most of the words we say. Hey, psychedelics. Psyche is a Greek word. Mm. So it means, by the way, it means soul or spirit. It doesn't mean mind. So that's perfect. A perfect example of cultural appropriation is the word was used and misused. It's not mind manifesting. It's soul or spirit manifesting. Psyche was a female also, by the way. But I look at these movies that are done about, the big Greek movies. Sparta was the most recent one. Troy, which was about Achilles. And what was the other one? Alexander. Disasters. Horrible, horrible movies played by white people. All white. Mostly white. Not one Greek. Maybe a bit part. So, we deal with that too. Mm-hmm. It's a racist culture. We live in a racist, sexist, classist culture. And we all need to work on that. We're talking about all this stuff, but I always want to bring it back to psychedelics because that's how I see psychedelics as fabulous. We're as humans, the species of human being, we have this funny brain. It's a great brain, but it also traps us a lot. And psychedelics are fabulous for just getting us to just shake that up a little bit and take a new perspective.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you see psychedelics playing a role in breaking or transforming some of this social programming?
If everybody had free access to psychedelics legally, I think we could have a very different world a lot faster. I think that the people in our field and our community, we're working as hard as we can to change perspectives, propaganda around psychedelics and cannabis as a psychedelic as well, in order to do just that. Yes, I do. But it's a big job. And, I've been working with ayahuasca for 10 years, And I still have plenty of things to work on in the medicine space. It's not a magic bullet. You don't go in there, or a magic pill. You don't go in and you come out perfect the other side the other night. You work on it. You get to one layer, then that layer affects your life, then you go back and you figure out some more things, and then you come home and then you integrate that into your life, and you go back and you work on something else. It's fascinating to me. I mean, we're very complicated.
yeah, I totally agree. Yeah,
and you have to live in this culture. You have to come back and somehow live in this culture with that altered idea, with that new perspective.
Which is sometimes the hardest thing to do, but also really, really exciting to see how you can adapt that, and see how you can evolve from it.
I think it's wonderful. I'm very excited about this work, and I do wish that, obviously I don't want to just make this a plug, but if there were more donations, I could do a lot more work with a lot more women, and I would really, really like to do that. We've got so many great women coming through the application form now. I can't possibly, give them all grants. It's not possible until people donate more, and a little goes a long way. Lots of people sending a little bit makes a huge difference. So it doesn't have to be somebody moneyed. Somebody moneyed would be fabulous, but I think this work is really it's touched upon a need. There's interest out there, and the women are fantastic. And I am blown away by some of the women. And by the way, all over the world these women are coming from.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about your organization? Because I don't think people necessarily know about your group yet.
Okay, well, Cosmic Sister has gotten a little press recently, and it's made a difference, and it's really getting out there. The concept of psychedelic feminism, I think putting those two words together made a difference, because it hit a cultural movement, or at least it sort of, there were women out there who related to it to the point where they are like, yes, and then they would pass that to a friend who would say, yes, and then they would all come to Cosmic Sister and learn more. And we are, Cosmic Sister did not start out as a psychedelic advocacy group. It's more than that. It's really a women's advocacy group, but psychedelics has definitely started to take off within it. And the so-called grants, the psychedelic feminism grants, are, there are 3 of them. The initial one is simply, supporting a woman to travel to the Amazon, the Peruvian Amazon, where ayahuasca is legal and precious and treated as a treasure. So not just legal, but treated as a cultural treasure, to experience a traditional ceremony or a series of ceremonies at a one of the finer centers. And we do move around. So that's the first grant, and it was started out as just an idea, because I just thought, well, I can't change the world, so maybe I can help one person a little bit at a time, and maybe that woman will then be empowered to go out and help somebody else. And it's grown, and it's exciting to me. I love that work. I really love it. The other 2 grants were created in part to work around Uncle Sam through MAPS, who's my fiscal sponsor. And what that means is they don't give me money. They don't give Cosmic Sister money. They allow people to donate through MAPS to Cosmic Sisters projects and get full tax deductions for them. And we have a kind of joke when we were talking about it's a formal fiscal sponsorship, so I had to sign papers and write a proposal. And the joke was, I don't think Uncle Sam will be okay with sending women down to the Amazon to trip. So we had to find a way around that, and the way we did was what we could get tax deductions for was for educational materials, creating them, developing them, that educated the risks and benefits, or I prefer to say benefits and risks of psychedelics and cannabis. And again, that's their mission statement. So for me, the focus is women, but also their mission, right? I'm not explaining it very well, but the 2 grants that go within that fiscal sponsorship, you can donate to those grants, and they're fully tax deductible, and they support the original grant, which is the grant for sending women down to trip in the Amazon, right? And the two other grants are very much the same. It's just that one focuses on women in cannabis, and the other focuses on women in psychedelics. And they're geared towards promoting more voices in the scene that are female. That's all it is. Whether you're just a regular woman, you're a mom, you have a great job, you're a student, maybe. It's not all women who are in the psychedelic field as professionals, but it's for them also. And that those materials that we create and publish can be everything from photojournalism to journalism to personal stories to presentations, and it's making a difference in terms of getting more women out there. And this is something that I learned from being in performing arts and then in PR, which was a natural progression. If you have what they call name and face recognition, you can build upon that to get more name and face recognition. It's not something that I want personally. I'm not an ego person like that at all. In fact, I don't really like the spotlight. But if I don't have name and face recognition for this work, it's practically impossible for me to get the media I need to promote the projects that we're doing that then generate funds to do more work. That's the way our culture is.
Right.
So that's the same with people in the field. So let's say you're somebody who is a psychedelic scholar or someone who's really working in the medicine world, like a medical doctor working with psychedelics or a psychedelic shrink. I love the psychedelic shrinks. They're just great. All of those people are doing good work. So let's say you're a woman that's not that well known but doing really great work. Or maybe you're just really shy or introverted and you don't want to get up on the stage with all those guys that are, get up there and whatever they look like, they'll get up there and talk. And they're declarative. And you're sitting in the audience and you're thinking, nobody knows me, but my work's really interesting and they should listen to mine too. It's really good. They would love it. I had that happen to myself, sitting in the audience thinking it's my own fault that I'm not up there. And it is my own fault. It's my own conditioning. I don't get up there for all the wrong reasons, and I'm still working on that in the medicine space. But I do sit there and go, wow, that guy's really interesting, or wow, that woman's really interesting. I have some things to share, too. Every time I go to a conference, I think that. Okay, that's been my role in this company, and that is primarily what funds Cosmic Sister, is my salary from that. My royalties from that company are what fund the grants. That's the truth. So it's ironic in a sense because from that work with other medicinal plants, like wonderful plants, maca, rhodiola, schizandra berry, all of these great, great medicinal plants, cannabis has emerged as this great ambassador. And here's how it will work. I'll get somebody on the phone, from a journalist or an editor looking for stories. They won't talk about ayahuasca because it's just too far out and they don't think they can get it past their editor or their producer or whatever. Okay, but then when I bring it back down to cannabis, all of a sudden cannabis is friendly territory. Whereas 10 years ago, let's say, if I brought up cannabis, it would be treated pretty much like ayahuasca.
Right.
See what I mean? So it's bridging that world. And then I may go back from there and talk about something like rhodiola or maca or schizandra or kava. Kava's having a reemergence in the culture. It's becoming popular again. It's another mood-modifying psychoactive, not psychedelic, but psychoactive from the South Pacific. And all of these plants more people are talking about plant medicine than ever before. And that is a huge difference I think people should know about. It's exciting. I've been doing this 10 years. That's not as long as a lot of people, but it's a good long time.
What people might not notice,
change.
People really might not notice that pharmaceutical companies are kind of stagnant right now. There's been no breakthrough drugs. And this herbal market has been blowing up really for the last 30 years, but really accelerating in the last 10, 15, 20. It's been really impressive to watch it. I've been watching it for maybe 12 now. But it's amazing. And I think you and Chris are having a huge impact too.
Well, yeah, thank you. That's really the work that we do. We're communicators, and we're not alone. And it's a movement too. I mean, we haven't brought up the natural products industry. When I first joined the natural products industry, I preferred to call it a movement as well. But they call it an industry because it is an industry. It is about trade. It's about products. It's about selling products. It's about buying products. So it's a trade, and that's important because that is how you get things done in the world. We have to have, it's an economic structure, you know. I make a little money, I pay you a little money, you pay somebody else a little money, and we all work together. That's the nature of currency. So in the natural products industry, you have this wonderful group of people who are trying to build a better model and have proven that these models work. They're the ones that got organic certified. There was no organic certified before the people in the natural products industry. They are championing the environment and the whole idea of mind, body, spirit, health. Of it's not only what you put into your body, it's also how it affects the rest of the world and the soil and the air and the water and the other critters. Those things are, each of those good products that are available, there are people behind those products. You know, and if you're not in that industry, you may not think about that. When you go to Whole Foods or your natural retailer, whoever it is in your area, you know, or even your farmer's market, but when you go to one of those bigger stores and you find these brands that you like and you buy one and it's certified organic, somebody, an individual, came up with that idea and built that brand and got it out there. And that's a lot of work. So those people are always looking for fresh ingredients, and many of those ingredients are plants, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where people like Chris were working, bringing in these medicinal plants like kava to places like that, who are always looking for new ingredients. And so that's where I met him in the natural products industry. I'm not really part of that scene anymore now because I'm too involved with, you know, sacred plants. It's sort of taken my career. When I first started working with Chris in the fields, which I had not done as an ethnobotanist, going into the fields means you go around the world and you go out farther and farther and farther in these exotic places, and you live with people in all sorts of interesting conditions, and they share with you their wonderful treasures and their medicinal plants and their other cultural treasures and the arts and spiritual traditions and all sorts of wonderful things. And then, you know, while you're there, you have these experiences with these people, and then you bring that back to our world. And I've been doing that for 10 years, and he's been doing it a lot longer than that. So, you know, when I'm out there with him, a lot of times he'll ask people, you know, are you working for the plant or is the plant working for you? And I've heard, yeah, it's great, isn't it? I've heard so many people answer that question, oh, I'm working for the plant.
Yeah, it's kind of like that Michael Pollan. I think he might have said that in
Botany of Desire. Yeah.
Yeah, he probably did. And it's a botanist type of question. Mm-hmm. And ethnobotany is in part botany. So to me, the funny thing is, when I first started traveling and doing this work with Chris, I was not even a plant person. I was an animal person, definitely, but not a plant person. I didn't see myself as a plant person, certainly. Now I have to say I am absolutely, without a doubt, working for the plants. So there it is. They called to me.
Yeah,
they recruited me. Yeah, definitely. Now, I do want to ask you guys this, because it seems that guys are a little different about this. It tends to be a guy thing, and I'm curious. I'm not big on synthetic psychedelics. I'm interested in the plants and the fungi, the natural psychedelics. And I think that's because of the ethnobotanical aspect. I love that work. I love and it's plenty. There's plenty of psychedelics there for me to explore because I'm lightweight. I don't need any more. But I'm really just not even interested in the synthetic psychedelics. And yet people are getting really great results from them, and people are talking about wonderful experiences that change their lives. How do you guys feel as guys? Do you think that there's a difference there with a gender thing? What do you think?
Kyle, I'll let you go first.
Well, I'm with you, Zoe. I'm more of a natural person. I guess like the semi-synthetics. I mean, LSD is definitely a natural kind of semi-synthetic substance. I think that's really interesting. MDMA definitely has potential, and really interested in that. But other than that, like some of those research chemicals and the newer derivatives of, like, say, LSD and stuff like that, not really interested in it, I guess, for my own exploration. I guess I'm more interested in working with a plant spirit. And I think because of that, I just come from kind of like that shamanic viewpoint, that working with the plant spirit. I remember, I think it might have been in one of Hoffman's books, but about how he synthesized psilocybin and then brought it to Maria Sabina. And she said, yeah, these are great. Like, I can use it when the mushrooms aren't in season, but it seemed like it kind of lost its spirit.
Interesting, yes.
So I guess I kind of come from that background and viewpoint. What about you, Joe?
I think there's a number of ways to look at it. I don't personally have a really strong position. With this show, we're trying to be kind of grounded, so we're not always presenting our true colors, which is tricky and complicated. You know, I have some pretty funny views about stuff, spiritually and energetically, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily saying synthetic stuff is bad. I enjoy synthetic substances. I also like natural substances. I would say I have a lot more time in with the synthetics, for sure. And perhaps that's just this blend, right? People are very different, and we're all doing it for different reasons. We're not all necessarily doing this stuff for the same reason. And certain attitudes and ways we talk about this stuff might turn people off. Maybe it's okay to do LSD psychotherapy for some people, and for maybe others, it's more ideal to spend a lot more time with ayahuasca or mushrooms. And other people are just doing it recreationally or celebratory, kind of thing, just to be closer with their friends and have a lovely night, the most fun they've ever had, kind of thing. Other people drink whiskey for that, right?
Yeah, I think that's all really spot on, and I'm not anti-synthetic, just to be clear. I feel like what you're saying is definitely right, and I think that one thing that's interesting too, from the work that I do in sustainability with other medicinal plants as well, is also valid when you look at the interest level that is just exploding in sacred plants now. You have to think about over-harvesting in the wild, and how are we going to handle that? We don't want to wipe these plants off the planet. We have to really consider, is this sustainable, and are we going to need to cultivate these plants? And people are cultivating these plants. So from that perspective alone, the synthetics are much more sustainable in that way. They can be made more for a lot less money, that more people can have access to them, and that's a good thing. But when you look at this idea of plant spirit, I'm a scientist's daughter, so I don't know. I'm an agnostic. I don't know, but I do feel a spirit in those plants. It does actually show up for me in the work. I don't know what that means, though. The scientist in me questions what that means. Am I really feeling another entity in my psyche when I commune with cannabis? Am I really feeling that with ayahuasca, or is it the interpretation that my human mind makes with this substance when it reacts with the chemicals in my brain? Who knows? But I do feel a spirit present. I do. And I'm not that type.
Yeah.
So I have to pay attention to that too. Also, the idea of spirit is an interesting word because it's also essence or personality even. So I have no problem, for instance, saying something, oh, look at the wonderful hummingbird that just came to visit me. He has such a beautiful spirit. I have no problem with saying the spirit of the rose. I feel those spirits. Or the spirit of a child I met. Oh, what a sweet spirit. What a happy spirit. So why wouldn't a plant or a fungi have a spirit too? It's just sort of semantics at a certain point. So who knows? And I guess I'm also interested in, you were saying the shamanic aspect. I'm also interested in the cultural traditions. And back in the day, they didn't have synthetic. Going back to the synthetics versus natural, one of the things that's important to me is that we evolved with the natural psychedelics. We did not evolve with the synthetic psychedelics. And that concerns me because I don't know really about the long-term safety, and I don't feel comfortable with that. And my brain is important to me, and so I don't mess with them. And I think that's where I firmly sit, although others can take that risk, and in certain cases it's a controlled risk, and they have every right to do that. And again, people are getting results. If somebody's addiction is cured by working with a synthetic, and they have a wonderful life because of it, then, I certainly wouldn't be a person to diss that synthetic. It's the results that really matter.
Right. Yeah. And I also appreciate the sustainability piece. I think iboga is definitely struggling with that. And I think in a lot of places they use like ibogaine, which is, a semi-synthetic of iboga, because, there's definitely an over-harvesting there. And for me personally with the synthetics, it just I'm definitely not against them. I think to evolutionary, like maybe we are entering into a new world of like biohacking with different chemicals and stuff like that. But for me personally, just like safety profiles of like, oh, you never know what you're getting, and there's a lot of adulterants and chemicals nowadays, and so for me personally, that's the only reason why I think of like the natural stuff.
We like to, on the show, Zoe, have a split, too, between stuff that does have kind of safety data and then the newer stuff, like research chemicals, where we barely have any information.
It's a significant point to make for our community to really look at, and some people could write about it if they haven't already. I think that's really important. I so often run into people who are wanting to get off psych drugs they've become addicted to, that we get more people coming in through the contact form for both Medicine Hunter and Cosmic Sister because of that. People who are addicted to psych drugs of various types, and they really don't want to be on them for the rest of their lives. It's the same story every time. I've tried and tried and tried, and I just can't get off them. Sometimes, there are some medicinal plants that aren't psychoactive or psychedelic that can really help you get, give your brain certain kinds of chemicals and help the brain to combat the original sources of depression and whatnot for a period of time. They can help you get off those drugs. But the problem is there's often a deeper aspect to the depression, and those kinds of things can often be worked on with substances like ayahuasca. And that also brings me to something I wanted to mention, and you guys understand this, but it's something that I think it's certainly a perspective of mine. People talk about taking ayahuasca or drinking ayahuasca, and it's not just the brew, it's not just the substance, it's a guided experience preferably with community. And that's important to me. I know I sort of shot into that, but I think that's part of the healing. I know that's part of the healing. I think that if you or I, sat down, you guys, and we all just sort of said individually on our own, we're going to drink ayahuasca and have a solo ceremony, like a private ceremony of our own, we'd probably be okay because we've had the experience of the other, and we know how to work with the medicine. I'm assuming you guys have tried ayahuasca. Yes?
Yes. I have, Kyle.
I have not, no.
Oh, okay. Well, I shouldn't have assumed that. Well, let's say you're experienced in one of these things and then you decide to do it on your own. You're probably going to get something out of it. But there are dangers in that also, because there's something about being in the protected space. And, I don't mean that in a woo-woo situation, I'm not coming from a woo-woo perspective. I'm coming from it really is a protected space because we all agree that it is. We're going in, we're going to be kind to each other, everybody's supportive with each other, we're going to take care of each other if we need some care, whether somebody's having a really bad trip or they're physically in pain or they're just getting to some really deep, dark stuff that's hurting and they're crying. We're there for each other in that space, no judgment. And there are trained, experienced people who are leading that ceremony. And they've seen it all.
Yeah.
Even if they're from a completely different culture, they recognize things and they've been trained to deal with them. So to me, that's really part of ayahuasca. When I say ayahuasca, I don't just mean the brew. And that's a distinction that most journalists don't get, and it's a pet peeve, really. So often they'll also refer to users, people who use ayahuasca. I work really hard not to use that word when, I don't like that word because it's the absolute opposite of how I feel about the medicine. I don't use the medicine. I would never use the medicine. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not a matter of use. It's
I would
really
say like maybe
complex
participate.
interaction. Yeah, you're participating in a medicine space. It's a really complex
journey with
interaction.
the medicine. Yeah, commune with the medicine. It's a bit, some people wouldn't like that one, but journey with the medicine, that works for me.
Or have relationship with the medicine. I know my one teacher always talked about doing medicine work. It's about relationship, being in relation with that.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And there's real truth to that, too, because it's a way of entering the space. And the space, that I like that term, too. I don't have a problem with the medicine space. When you're in that state, you're in the medicine, it means that you're in that altered state for that period of time. That's when you can do this particular type of work. And it's valuable, and if you're focused and you really focus on your intentions, you can get tremendous value out of that experience. It's not to say you do this every day. You get, there's no addiction here either. You don't have to do it every day. You do it, and then you work on what you learned and incorporate it in your life. That's what it's about to me.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and the work with women, again, it's more about we have our particular things, and sometimes we want or maybe even need sisterhood to work through those things. And so there's something about that. This is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm getting back from the women who've been on these journeys with us. There are commonalities. Not every one of them says the same thing, but there tends to be women who are saying the sisterhood was important to me and really helped me get to what I needed to get to. Or another one I hear a lot is, I found my voice. Ayahuasca helped me find my voice. I didn't even know I was repressing my voice. I hear that a lot. So these are specifically women things, although, again, maybe males also experience similar types of things.
I think so.
I don't know. I'm not a guy.
Like, that's kind of a way I would look at it, too, for me. I don't think I found my voice until after. I did a lot of breath work, too, but I think this was a really strong catalyst in my whole self-development process, for sure.
Great. Well, for me, I did a lot of other trancey type work too before I entered the psychedelic scene, and I trance dancing with belly dance for many, many years. I haven't done it recently, but I did it professionally for a while when I was younger, and that you can really get into a flow state. Also, any of the arts, painting, acting, when you're really in the zone, you're really in an altered state of a sort, and you can do wonderful work with that. But it's not the same. There's something about the way these plants interact with the human consciousness that helps us to be better humans. And, I don't need to tell you or anybody else listening to this that we really need to do that as a species. We are really failing. Mm-hmm. What's going on right now with this whole rally in Charlottesville? Terrible. What happened?
It's very confusing.
Yeah, it's really hard. Trump is really hard for me. In the symposium interview that Leah did, I had just come back from the Amazon, and I talked about Trump because it was that interim period. He had been, quote, elected, unquote, but he had not been inaugurated yet. So we were all kind of hoping that would happen. So we're down there in the Maloka, and I was trying not to focus on it, but I knew perfectly well that it would come up for me, so I just took it up right away in the first ceremony, and I just said, how am I going to handle Trump? Not personally.
It's like the shadow that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to go down there again and say, okay, I need some more. But I did get a very clear answer, and it was really surprising. It was a long, interesting, winding vision, which, I could share, but I really shared it pretty well in that interview, I think. That ended with sort of an affirmation to continue on the psychedelic feminism work. And that wasn't something I was looking for, so I felt like that was really the right answer at the time, and maybe it still is, but I still find myself having a lot of trouble with this situation with our country. I think also I'm a patriot, and I don't like what is happening from that perspective. But from another perspective, it's just really scary to see so many people right here at home behaving so badly.
Yeah, there's a great quote when we had Natalie Ginsburg on for MAPS, and I was looking at it today, and I was thinking about updating on the social media, but because after all that stuff that happened in Virginia, but it was through my lens, so many problems in this world are driven by people acting from a reactionary place of fear and pain instead of a place of compassion and love. And I think a lot of that is true, that we just react
fear
out of fear and pain.
Yeah, fear and pain. I think also ego is huge in the case of our current president. And you could say that was fear and pain, maybe, I suppose. But, I think what it, again, comes down to the same thing. This, again, I don't want to like to use the word youth, but exploring sacred plants for personal evolution, which then, the personal is political and individuals make up subcultures and cultures. And so therefore our own personal healing and growth can in fact help the world. And it's really the only thing we can do. That's the truth. We can only work on ourselves. We can support and encourage others to work on themselves, but we cannot do the work for those people. We can only become better people personally ourselves. And that is what I am doing, trying to do myself, and I'm very humble. I still have plenty of things to work on, and I look forward to doing that, actually. But I also really love watching others grow, and I've just seen so much of it, and I want to do more. And that's really the work I'm doing. I don't like to say I'm an evangelist because I don't like the religious aspect of that, but I really do see this as something extraordinary that's happening. The interest in these plants and this work, my concern with this administration is that a lot of this progress that we've made, it concerns me that they could come and do something about it and really try to destroy what we're up to or clamp down on some of it. That concerns me, I think, and I think it concerns a lot of people. And I think that one of the things that was happening before he was elected was that we were feeling the opposite. We were feeling so great. I mean, look, Obama wasn't perfect, but he was a great person, and Michelle was wonderful too, and they did a lot of good work. And they were up against a lot of odds, with people, basically racists in the White House, who wouldn't let him do good work. But he did do some things, like, changing prisons not being private entities, which is absurd. Privatization of prisons is absolutely absurd. And he did get rid of that, and Trump promptly put it back in place. So we have many examples of that where we had actual progress and significant progress in human rights and environmental ways with Obama, and we are now seeing them be pulled out from under us again, and it's just a really, really hard thing when you're a progressive person working for human evolution, and you see this person who has ended up in the seat of power with a superpower. Our country is still a superpower, and it's really disturbing and hard. So I'm just sharing that with the community, and I know I'm not alone.
Yeah, it is scary. I worry about this stuff all the time. I mean, especially since there has been a lot of progress in the psychedelic realm. I'm always like, is it gonna just kind of come to a stop? Yeah, it's kind of a weird time.
Yeah, it is a weird time. I think what we have to do as a community is just persist, and that's a word that's being used for a lot of things. But we have to look at the long run here. This is a long game, and even if our worst case scenario, we're stuck with this person for 4 years, which is a really scary idea, but if we are, surely not 8 years. We really just can't let that happen. But if we're stuck with him for 4 years, we just have to stick it out and keep looking forward, and we have to expect there to be setbacks, because there already have been, and there will be more. And what's most difficult is the things that he's doing that actually harm and will harm not just humans, because he's changing people's lives by some of the decisions he's making, but also the environment and animals, and those things, are very hard to watch. But for our work with psychedelics and liberating the plants and basically getting more people the rights to journey with the plants that we co-evolved with, that work, we just have to look at the long game and push through it.
Yep.
And if we're set back, we're set back, and we just take it up again on the other side. It's the same with racism, it's the same as classism, it's the same as sexism, it's all the same. We have to keep moving forward, and if it's 5 steps forward, 4 steps back, you can't quit.
Yep, keep moving forward. So, I think we're about time, probably way over, but that's okay because I've been enjoying the conversation. Is there any last remarks or anything you want to toss out to the listeners?
I think that if I were to share anything more, is to just, remember so many of us in this space have discovered in one way or another that it's all about love, and it really, truly is. If there's one thing that sums up this work, that's what it is. That's, love for life, love for the miracle that is life, love for each other, and that's really the thing. That's what it's all of the sacred plants are getting to. I think that's the real message, the heart message. Mm-hmm. So, I think that I'm preaching to the converted here, but I really think that sometimes that's what we, to remind ourselves of that there's nothing wrong with reminding ourselves.
Yeah, great, wonderful. And where can people find you? Are you online anywhere?
The easiest thing is either zoehelene.com or cosmicsister.com. They go to the same place. I have a small Twitter page. I'm not a big Twitter person, but you can find me on social media. But you can find all of that on the site. And if you need to reach out to me through the contact form, I'm really easy to reach. I do respond. And I love hearing from people in the scene. Anybody who's a good person, who's interested, I'm there, and I love these conversations. So I have to say, I love the people in this scene. We're very lucky.
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty awesome scene. After being at Sci Science back in April, I was like, wow, yeah, these are a group of wonderful, smart people.
It's very, very exciting to be part of it, and I just look forward to meeting you guys in the flesh, because I know I will.
Absolutely. We actually, we'll wrap for now.
You think we met at Symposia back in the day?
You and I met at the Boston Ayahuasca Monologues in... Oh,
my gosh. Oh, that's so great.
I put that event on. Yeah, I hosted that, and Chris was gracious enough to speak, which is lovely.
Fantastic.